Whoa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Sunday. Yeah, it's Sunday. Oh, so yeah, the other day the American Empire invaded and annexed Venezuela and abducted the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. Yeah. Now, before I go on, I need to point out something, and that is Maduro was a bad leader. He was a bad president. He was an opportunist. If he had not stood up for his country, the Americans would have allowed him to rule, simply because he would have been their kind of guy. But unfortunately for him, he mixed his petty corruption with badly thought out patriotism. He still wanted Venezuela to be for the Venezuelans. He just had a more limited understanding and idea of who the Venezuelans were going to be. This made him unacceptable to the American Empire because, well, they wanted a dictator who was in it for the Americans, not the Venezuelans. Maduro did not create the problems in Venezuela. He didn't. He did not create them. He inherited them from his predecessor, Chavez, who inherited them from his predecessors, who inherited them from generations of bad government and American-backed right-wing paramilitaries. And Venezuela's troubles really began in the 1920s. And that's when the American Empire basically installed a succession of brutal and corrupt generalissimos who were constantly being overthrown and replaced by the next guy that the Americans installed. Yeah. That was the 1920s and 30s. In the 40s, the Americans were focused on a war in Asia and a war in Europe, and Venezuela broke into civil war. And then in the 1950s, the Americans came back in and installed yet another brutal dictator. And that's been the history of Venezuela. Venezuela's first good president was Hugo Chavez. And yeah, Chavez was what we would call a liberal socialist. That is, he was a reform-minded individual who wanted to make the country better. He wanted to fix what was broken, and he did try. He failed, but he did try. And then he died. And there should have been an election. He even said that if he died undergoing cancer treatment, he wanted an election. Instead, Maduro declared himself president. However, that is not the point. The point is that what Donald J. Trump did was illegal and immoral. He didn't do this for the Venezuelan people. He did it for the American oil companies. And he's even gone so far as to say that, yeah, we're not letting the Venezuelans run their country. We're going to run it for them. Or rather, to them. And more importantly, over them. He's not going to install a Venezuelan gangster or a Venezuelan generalissimo. He's going to install an American military governor whose job is to make sure that the oil flows to America. Pardon me. And that is the issue. His excuse, the claim that Venezuela is supplying fentanyl to America, is bullshit. Something like 70% of the fentanyl in America is domestically produced, and the other 30% is mostly from Asia. Venezuela is not and has never been a major source of drugs in America. However, Maduro was inconvenient. His petty corruption, and yes, he was corrupt, was not matched by groveling subservience to the American empire. Pardon me. He did not supply the Americans with oil. He did not supply American military brothels with beautiful young Venezuelan girls. He did not supply American supermarkets with really cheap tropical fruit produced by slave labor. He did none of the things that an American-backed South American democracy is supposed to do, except enrich himself. He did that. But he wasn't supposed to enrich himself without first enriching some Americans. That's how the deal always worked. And Trump has brought back Manifest Destiny. He has brought back the Reagan and early Bush era of American policy in Central and South America that comes from before the Americans got sidetracked in the Middle East. The Americans have installed their puppet regimes in Iraq and Syria and Libya. And those puppet regimes will stand until the Israelis come along and say, okay, leave now, this is ours. And that's the plan. They're going to enrich themselves while they wait for the Israelis to show up and kick them out. So now America can get back to the business of ruling Central and South America the way they did before George Bush got distracted. Yeah, and that's the thing. The distraction is over. Now it's time to bring things back to the way they were in the 1980s, in the 1970s, in the 1960s, in the 1950s, and in the 1920s and 30s. When countries in the Caribbean, countries in South America, all lived in fear of getting a visit from the Americans. And here we are here in Canada. We need to be a little concerned about this too because, yeah, Trump didn't just lie when he said that Venezuela is sending fentanyl to America. He also lied when he said that Canada, our country, is, quote, sending fentanyl to America. That's his excuse. And yeah, he has already planned for the removal of our legally elected Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and his replacement with a temporary American-backed El Presidente named Pierre Poilievre. Canada has resources as well that the Americans want. We do. We have oil, coal, uranium, iron, copper, lumber, potash, wheat, soybeans. We have these resources. We have these crops. We have water. We have the world's largest reserves of fresh water. You can make a lot of golf courses green in the American southwestern desert with water strip mined from Canada. All it takes is for Donald J. Trump to install Poilievre as Canada's new El Presidente. Oh, and by the way, they also want our hospitals. They want to privatize our health care. And they've wanted this for a long time. And yes, Poilievre is all in favor of that as well. More than a quarter of the land in Canada is owned by native reservations. The Americans want that. Polyev has already made abundantly clear that he will hand that land over to foreign developers. And if the natives get in the way, well, the American empire can mop up the resistance. And there'll be no more pesky Injuns. Polyev has also made abundantly clear that he wants Canada to have one religion and one skin color, which means that not just the elimination of Canada's Sikh, Hindu, and Muslim communities, but also Canada's Wiccan community, and also Canada's Jewish community. Yeah. So any Jews out there who support Polyev and want to stay in Canada need to start making a choice. Do you want to live in Canada, or do you want to see Polyev become our El Presidente? Pick one, because you cannot have both. Yeah. But it gets worse, because it won't be mainstream Christianity. It will be American evangelical fundamentalist batshit young earth creationist nonsense. It won't be about Jesus. It'll be about the American flag. So, yeah, we would lose our health care. We would lose our religious diversity. Quebec would be forced to teach English only and have English only signage. We would lose our natives, which, yes, that does include me. I am Métis. You can only pretend to be white for so long. Yeah. Carney may not be the leader that I would want, but at least he's not going to sell the country to Donald Trump in exchange for the privilege of being allowed to serve as our El Presidente. Yeah. We need to be careful. We need to start arming. We need to immediately build a domestic firearms industry that is spread across the country so that it cannot be taken out in one single attack. We need a national rifle in a national caliber. And we need to make sure that that rifle and that ammunition are mass-produced right across the country. And yes, we do need to start establishing a whole lot of ethnic regiments that are not Scottish Highland regiments. We need to make sure that every minority in this country feels welcomed in the military. And we need to make sure that they understand that Canada is counting on them. So if you're a Canadian citizen and you're between the ages of 16 and 65, or you're a new immigrant who wants to become a Canadian citizen and you're between the ages of 16 and 65, my advice to you is go enlist. Join the Canadian military, join the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, whatever. I mean, that's what I plan on doing. Mark Carney sucks. But at least he's not Pierre Poilievre. That's the only good thing that he really has going for him. He's not Pierre Poilievre. The Liberals suck, but at least they are not Maple MAGA. We are on the same list that Venezuela was on. We need to understand this, and we need to take precautions, take steps, and make sure that we are ready when the day comes to fight for the defense of our country. That's not hyperbole. That's acceptance of the screamingly obvious. We are, as a nation, in danger. And I hate having to talk about that. But it is reality. Anywho, bienvenue, vive le Canada.